All right, good afternoon, everybody. I know we're still going to have a few more filing in just a few minutes. We've got some of our guests online. So we have a pretty packed, or at least I think, a packed schedule. We'll see how it goes. We're going to have some guests coming in a few minutes. But first and foremost, I'd like to know, first of all, welcome and I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Somebody went to Mexico back there. That's pretty cool. Did you guys have a good Thanksgiving break? Feeling relieved? Anybody do anything super cool they want to share out? Wait, who went to Hawaii? And how was Hawaii? It was amazing. Where'd you guys go? All right, Oahu. I myself got to go to Southern California, which doesn't sound very exotic, but it was 95 degrees and humid when we landed in Long Beach, and about 75 when we left, which is when the coastal eddy kicks in and the ocean breeze comes into my parents' house. That's the reminder of home. Got to play some fun football, but my parents had their 50th wedding anniversary, so I got to host that. So it was a pretty cool weekend. Well, good. I'm glad you're all here, and thank you for being here today and taking the time out of your day. I really appreciate it. I want to make it worth your while. So on today's agenda, we have a few things to cover. Some of you were in the meeting with Jennifer, and we're going to be doing some of the same things here, and I have a feeling we might see some of the same themes. Unfortunately, secondary, we don't get as much legislative money or really any legislative money set aside for programs and things like that. But Jennifer and I were sitting down and talking a few days ago with what direction we want to take the literacy directors meetings. And so she came up with the idea of what's working and what's not working in your LEAs. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. I'm going to have you guys working in groups, and then we're going to walk around and see how you guys are feeling about what's working and what's not working as far as K-12 literacy. We're focusing more on 6-12 literacy. She talked about the K-5, K-6 earlier today. We're going to be talking about some changes with assessment, with SAGE and ACT, and I'm hoping to assuage any fears or concerns. Sydney, Carter, and Rebecca are coming down to talk to us for quite a while about that. And I want you guys to ask as many questions as possible. They're more of the experts on SAGE than I am. That's what they really cover is the assessment piece of teaching and learning. And then we'll talk about some upcoming professional learning and workshop opportunities, some course offerings that we're going to be having in the spring for anybody working on an endorsement, and then question and answers, anything that comes up during the meeting that we didn't address or you didn't feel like we addressed sufficiently. I welcome that conversation as well. So first and foremost, I want to know what's working and what's not working. And again, when Jennifer and I were talking about this, they're changing a lot of the funding models and how the funding is going to be distributed. And we were thinking of ideas, and this year, secondary English isn't going to be affected in any way, shape, or form. But what we're hoping is in succeeding years, that as they take the money and they focus on K3 and they want to move it up to K5, is we're hoping that we can start moving some of that funding towards 6-12. But in order to do that, we want to know what's going on in the districts and the LEAs and the charters, and we want to know what's happening with you guys and the advances you're seeing, the things that are going well, and then also the things that need to be improved upon, whether it's on our end or your end or both. Things that we can do to help you guys out. We've had a lot of changes here at USBE, and we're adjusting to those changes. Some of them involve travel and the time out of office and things like that. But as we kind of navigate and figure that out, we still want to make sure that we're readily available to help you in any way, shape, or form and support you. So what I want to do is I want to spend 15 minutes in small groups. I think we got we can do 4 groups with this. Oh, maybe we'll do 3 groups. That'll be better. And those of you that are online, I will go online and see what kind of suggestions you have and write them down and share them out when we come back together as a group. But I want you to take 15 minutes to generate ideas of what is working and what is not working when it comes to K-12 or 6-12 literacy, including professional learning, professional support, programs, literacy programs, or programs that help with diverse learners and mediating those issues, as well as anything else. Anything else that comes up off the top of your head, like this is working really great. And I want you to share out those ideas of what is working and what isn't. And I'm hoping this gives you a chance to network some of those ideas and bounce ideas off of each other. She is right there, Mr. Lawrence. Sorry, we had some technical issues, so we have some help coming in. And then 10 minutes to do a gallery stroll. So there's only going to be 3 groups, but that way you can look at what the other groups were discussing and put a tally mark next to it if it's something that you agree with. If it's something that, doesn't concern you, just leave that blank. So I wanted to get you guys some markers. And I think what we'll do is we will do this row here. We'll have you guys up over in this corner. The second row, we'll have you up against that wall, and the door, we'll close the door because that's got the other poster on it. And then the third group, we'll just put you on the other door. I set up 4, but I think we'll only do 3. So the third group will be our friends in the back there. So are there any questions of what I am envisioning of what I want you to do, or any comments before we get started? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, so come up and grab a marker. Have 1 scribe per group. I have horrible penmanship, so I would never be that scribe. But if you've got nice penmanship that when we share out and we can all read and look at. And that way, at USB, we can see what some of those concerns and questions, as well as some of the things that are working. So when Jennifer and I meet again, we can start bouncing some of these ideas and generating some things that we can do in the future to help support you. And honestly, in some ways that you could help support us and help other LEAs. Okay? So please come up and grab a marker. Again, front row, we're going to have you on this door and this wall. Second row, we're going to have you on that wall right there by the fishes. And then you can close the door because the other poster's on there. And maybe we'll have our 5th friend on this row. Since there's 5 in this row, 3 in this row, I'll have you go back with them on that door and the wall that's just around the corner. I'm going to give you about 5 more minutes to share out. 5 more minutes. Give you 1 more minute to finish up in your groups, and then we'll do our stroll. Okay, so I want to give you about 10 minutes, and we might not need 10 minutes you can either do this individually or in your groups, to just do a gallery stroll to the other group ideas. There's only 2 other ones besides yours, so it should go pretty quick. And just make a mark. So I've got markers up here. Just make a mark with ones that you totally agree with. And if it's something that's not an issue for you, don't just leave it alone. So go ahead and take about 10 minutes to walk around and do that. Thanks. It can be a tally mark, or as Ashley mentioned, it could be a star. It could be a happy or frowny face. Anything you want. Just a mark. Make your mark.
Camera painter, please enter your PIN followed by the pound key. To leave a message for this subscriber, press the pound key. To log on as another subscriber, press the star key. Nothing has been selected. Please enter your PIN followed by the pound key. To leave a message for this subscriber, press the pound key. To log on as another subscriber, press the star key. Nothing has been selected. Thank you for using the messaging service. Goodbye.
Take about 1 more minute. All right, so thank you for working with us through that exercise. I heard a lot of really good conversations going on. I'm intrigued by a lot of these. We're running out of time to... why is that TV screen doing that? Okay. Let's see. Let me make sure my WebEx is still working. It looks like it is. Okay, it looks like it's still working. They had technical difficulties earlier today, so per usual, right? Okay, so thank you for working through that. I mean, just looking at the posters, we can see some glaring things that aren't working. We can also see some things that are working really well. This will help give Jennifer and I and the teams that we produce, it'll give us a lot of fodder to really look over and to see what kind of changes need to be made. And so I'll be meeting with her in the next week or so before Christmas break, holiday break. Sorry, I didn't want to offend anybody there. But before the holiday break, we're going to be meeting and kind of looking over these things and seeing the direction that we really want to take some of our supports for you, and also getting a chance to network and see things that are working, and you supporting us and working with other LEAs to help them with concerns that they have. So now we're going to move on. We have a couple of guests. Oh, this was one recommendation that came from online. From Tammy Smith. She said, if I could make a recommendation, it would be for professional development, especially in the 9 through 12 literacy. It seems that elementary teachers are great at these strategies, but secondary, maybe not so much. And I didn't go through a traditional route. I was an alternative route to licensure, so I wouldn't know the pedagogy. And when I went through my master's degree and went through the pedagogy courses, they did focus a lot on that, but I kind of went in a different route. But that was one of the concerns that came from online. Okay, so we're going to move on to Sydney Carter. I'll let her introduce herself, and she's going to talk to you. Hopefully you all have the handouts that were by the sign-in sheet. If you don't, they're still there.
Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, like Garrett mentioned, I'm Sydney Carter. I'm the Assessment Development Coordinator here at the USBE. Previous to working on all assessment, I was the elementary language arts assessment specialist, but my background is I started out teaching 7th grade English for 5 years and then moved into the elementary schools and then moved to the district level before coming to the state. So language arts is my true love. Now I focus on all assessments, but really language arts is where I feel the most comfortable. So we have a couple of new updates that I know you'll be especially interested to discuss. So the first one is the paper that has the border. Changes with the 3-8 writing assessment. So for this school year, the 2017-18 school year, the change in writing is that in 3rd through 8th grade, students will participate in 1 essay response instead of 2. It'll be random which genre they will be responding to. So between informative or argumentative or opinion in the earlier grades, the students will have 1 essay that they're responding to. This sheet is from my lovely team here. Megan and Kim have gone around the state training teachers with a writing training. So many of you have heard about the trainings. We have a second session coming up in February. They did like 1,100 miles across the state in 1 week, traveling around and training hundreds and hundreds of teachers. And it was telling to us because as soon as the registration for the workshops opened up, they filled up nearly immediately, and we had wait lists at pretty much every location. So we're excited that teachers across the state are still focusing on writing, and that writing is still a focus for teachers and what we think is important with writing. But some of the changes that we have coming for this year, in addition to moving from 2 prompts to a single prompt, they will have these new condition codes. So these 2 new condition codes, we started these, I'm sure all of you remember last spring. They started in the spring at the summative test, and then we decided, no, we can't change in the middle of the year how people have been testing. We can't change that. So we rescored everything, but said, okay, these will be back on starting this fall. So if you have teachers who have assigned an interim or a benchmark assessment to students, particularly in writing, they will have seen these codes if they had a student that hit one of these thresholds. So the 2 codes are first prompt copy match. That happens when a student copies more than 70% of their response comes directly from the passages that the stimulus material that they're reading from. So if they have less than 30% of their own original writing, they will hit this flag. If they hit a flag, then all students, no matter which grade, on the summative assessment will go to hand scoring. So you'll still be able to see if you do an interim or a benchmark, you'll still see these codes if the student hits that, but we obviously don't send hand scoring for benchmark or interims. But on the summative assessment, if they hit this code, it will go to hand scoring. Now, that doesn't mean to say you'll never see a student that has this code, because after human scorers read this paper, they may still respond with this code and say, this student has completely copied this essay, it doesn't deserve a score more than the lowest score, which is a 1. So you may still have teachers see my student got prompt copy match. That's after it's gone. Well, it may be going to human scorer, and if it comes back and still has that code, the human scorer assigned it that code still. Let's see. Then with the duplicate text is where students are copying the same letter, sentence, phrase, word, paragraph over and over, which we saw a couple of times. This didn't happen nearly as often. Last year we had high percentages of students that were copying quite a bit of their text, and it decreased as it went down, but in 3rd grade it was like 12% of the students in the state hit this code last year. So we're hoping that changes by people being aware of it. Duplicate text happened with like less than 1% of the population. It was quite a bit smaller, but some of our savvier students found out that they could write one really strong paragraph and then copy that paragraph over and over and get a very high score. Or we also saw students in actual student writing that was hitting this code of duplicate text when they would do something that was almost stylistic, like they would say there are. Whoops, I'm pushing buttons. Oh, that's you. Okay. There are three rocks types, metamorphic, igneous, and sedimentary, blah, blah, blah. And then they would continue with the rest of their paragraph. And then each paragraph they would say, there are 3 rock types, blah, 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 blah. And then continue with that paragraph. So it was something that was more stylistic, and maybe it wasn't necessarily the strongest writing, but it didn't deserve the lowest score. So in the past, what happened last year was that it was automatically assigned the lowest score. So once again, that's changed so that anything that hits either one of these either one of these condition codes will be sent for hand scoring on the summative assessment. And so they can get a human score looking at it. But also if we have the student who just writes B, 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 B over and over again, they don't get a score for that. So each of those condition codes will be changed for the summative, but you can see those. So our recommendation as you look further at this paper is that you assign or ask teachers to assign students interim or benchmark assessments. We really encourage the benchmark assessments because with the benchmarks, you can not only see how the student scored, but you can actually see the student responses as well as the stimulus material that was provided to the students for the writing. But also in language arts and in math and science, you can also see every item, how the students responded. You can start to do some analysis of, all of my students missed this question, so this may be something that I want to make sure that we are covering again. So the benchmarks are helpful. There are 2 benchmarks for each genre. So there's 2 informative, 2 argumentative for each grade level. And then there are 2 of each reporting category for language arts, math, and in science in high school and in elementary. So the difference in science, which I don't know if you guys will know or not or care, but we have our new science standards coming up. So our science benchmarks and interims are not there because we're developing new assessments. Anyways, any questions on 3 through 8 writing? Yeah.
Okay. Where they're changing the hand scoring for the students who are flagged, does that mean there will be fewer hand scores for the people who score that difference between?
Right. So the question about typically we have about 20% of our students go for hand scoring. That 20% comes from students with low confidence scores. So typically their scores are the ones that are like right between the line. A lot of times these will take the place of those. So we're not planning on scoring more than 20%, but that would still
Cut down the number of essays that are looked at for other reasons.
for other low confidence scores. Yeah. Yes, that's true. Any other questions?
Can you give us some other what are some other qualifications for low confidence?
So typically the low confidence happens when the computer, it's like trying to decide between a 2 and a 3 or a 3 and a 4. It's like right on the level. And so it wants a human scorer to come in and do a back read. Yes, yep, the computer flags it.
Haven't you also done, if their score on the other part of the English test is very different from the writing test, did that also trigger us?
So Originally, that's what we were told, was that those low confidence scores came from if a student scored high on the reading and low on the writing, or vice versa, low on writing and high on reading, those were sent. I don't know. When I followed up with AIR and asked that again, that they said that wasn't necessarily what was being sent. So they said when I followed up, because that was my understanding as well, was we're seeing in discrepancies between the different assessments, and those were the students that were going for hand scoring, but it wasn't always the case. It was typically more those that are kind of riding the line between one or another proficiency level. Kim, yeah.
I just want to add something too. With the benchmark modules, one of the questions I get a lot is teachers will go, and some of you may have done that, you go look at the scale scores for writing. I'm talking specifically about writing. And a lot of people are getting like, my scale scores look weird or whatever it is. The modules, because they're fixed form tests, scale scores have a huge standard error of measure. And the reason why we're encouraging everyone to give the SAGE writing benchmarks is because of the instructional use of those. So if teachers are just stopping when they get into airways and look at the report and just looking at scale scores, they're really losing the value of that. And they really do need to click on their students and actually look at the response that they have and look at the rubric. And that's when they will see if the students are getting prompt copy match and duplicate text. And today we were just at a school this morning, and one of the teachers showed it to me. It was a 7th grader, and she went, "Oh, that's what, we had showed them," but she was like, "Oh, I get this now." And that's really why, because she was trying to figure out why she had some kids that were scoring really low. And so you probably want to remind your teachers, they really do want to click in and look at what the response is and look at the rubric and really think about what it's really showing about writing, because that's really what the point is of this. It's not really just we're going to give this and then we're moving it on. So. Has a really large error of measure. What happens with fixed form test is this. You can have the same kids take the same test, and a student may miss a question that has a higher level of difficulty. It's a much harder question, and a student missed the same number of questions on the test, but they missed, say, all the easy ones. We'll make that up. And they could get a similar score. The scale score is going to look really different because it's the more difficult questions are weighted differently, and there's no way a teacher can look at that and figure that's all behind the scenes. And so that's why on fixed form tests, the standard error of measure is different that way. And a lot of teachers, you've done a great job training everybody on how to look at their scale scores, and everybody wants to go to a chart and go, "Oh, this means this." They really just need to look for the writing at the writing. Look at the writing rubric, look and see where the kids are scoring. Because if they stop at the scale score, like I had a teacher say, "Look, according to the chart, all of my kids are nobody's getting a 2. So I clicked down into the student, and most of that student's scores were 2s for most of his students were scoring 2s on the rubric in each category. So that's why that rubric is there. If that was clear as mud, I'm not sure. So.
And I'm not sure if you're there yet. It just says, why the changes in the SAGE writing? Why is 9th and 10th being eliminated, as well as 3rd, 4th, and 6th for next year?
What a great transition. I know that's the topic that I started with the one that I knew was not going to be as inflammatory. So Friends Online, we're getting to the question about 9th and 10th, which I think is our next slide. So I think any other questions on 3 through 8 writing benchmarks? Okay, so for 9th and 10th grade, 2 things. I'll talk to you about what's going on with the RFP for the upcoming year, as well as the assessment and the decisions that were made for 9th and 10th grade writing. So this summer, as we were moving forward with our RFP, which is a request for procurement for our state assessment, the decision was made to stick with just a 3rd through 8th grade assessment, because what is legislated through state law in 9th and 10th grade is drastically different than what's legislated through 3rd through 8th grade. In 3rd through 8th grade, there are a lot of stipulations on what we have to assess, including that we have to have a language arts, math, and science assessment, and in which grades we have to assess. It has to be computer adaptive. There has to be a parent review that reviews every single item that's placed before a Utah student. there's a lot of requirements. In 9th and 10th grade, the only thing that the state law says is, first, that the assessment shows a growth score from 9th grade to 10th grade. And second, that it is predictive of the college and career readiness assessment given in the 11th grade. So those are the only two stipulations. It doesn't have to be administered on a computer. It doesn't have to be computer adaptive. It does not have to show growth from 8th to 9th grade. There's a whole lot of open in what's legislated. So it was decided to remove 9th and 10th grade because it was so different in what was required to do its own RFP for 9th and 10th grade specifically. So we've had a committee that's been put together of people that have been writing this RFP, and that will be released tomorrow, should be going up tomorrow, and then we'll have a 6-week window for vendors to be able to put their proposals together, and that window should close like the 2nd week of January. And then we'll have a scoring committee that we'll probably be talking with Garrett about we need a couple of teacher or district literacy people involved on the scoring for that 9th and 10th grade RFP, as well as assessment directors, school board members, our content people. There's a lot of people that are involved in the scoring of that RFP. And then our hope is to have a contract in place by March. This is an extremely tight timeline, so I'm hopeful that that happens because we have to have something in place for the fall, for 9th and 10th grade for the assessment. So that's kind of the timeline of what is working, what's in the works for the next year. Now, as of this year, so the changes for this year, because what happened last year, our department and lots of other people were under the assumption that we would be administering ACT Aspire in 9th and 10th grade. And then due to issues with the board and going to the Attorney General's office, we realized that we could not do a sole source contract because there were several other vendors that could provide an assessment that was predictive of the 11th grade assessment, which is ACT. So just because ACT Aspire is also from ACT doesn't mean it's the only one that could provide a predictive score. In fact, our technical advisory committee said any well-written test can be predictive of college and career readiness. So we had the Attorney General's office take a look at it, our attorney, and say we can't do a sole source contract. We have to go back out for RFP. So when the decision was made to continue with SAGE for 9th and 10th grade for this school year, concerns were brought to the state school board about the changes. So many districts had already put plans in place to move forward with ACT Aspire and to move forward with that assessment and plans for courses that they were planning at their schools to support that. And they were upset that we were going back and forth and saying, okay, we're doing ACT Aspire and now we're doing SAGE and we've already made decisions and school year's already started, and there were concerns that we had gone back and forth and back and forth. So the school board heard that and they said, okay, well, one way to make the change be not as painful is to remove writing from 9th and 10th grade. So that was the board decision. You see the other note here. That the board decided to remove writing from 9th and 10th grade for this upcoming school year, and we will not be assessing writing if you assess in the spring of the school year. So there's a couple of things to note. One thing, first of all, I want to preface all of this with, we had a few districts that were really concerned about this, specifically with not having writing and being able to look at longitudinal data, being able to compare students, being able to compare scores for year after year and look at some trend data. And we're concerned about not having that common data to be able to look at. And so we've been talking with the superintendents and the board to say, we don't want, the board rule is put in place, so we can't go against what the board is saying, but there are things that we have to do on the system side to be able to take writing out. So in the meantime, writing is still available. If anybody takes a summative assessment starting now until March 8th, writing will still be a part of that assessment. So we have places like Cache School District where they, it's based on course codes, and they take their SAGE assessment based off of when they do their writing course and when they do their language arts course. So sometimes they would do writing in the fall when they have that course, and then they have a language arts course in the spring, and they take that part of SAGE in the spring. So they had a major concern with, well, we do both the different parts of the assessment at different times during the year. So we've been in the works with AIR and with our school board to see what's possible. So let me tell you what the plan is as of now, and then know that that may be changing in the next couple of weeks. So, so I have to tell you what we shared with the assessment directors, because things may change in the next week as far as scoring, but let me tell you what's in place as of now. Okay, so there are two summative windows for 9th and 10th grade. There's a summative that's taken in the fall, and there's a summative that's taken in the spring. As of now, if you take the summative assessment in the fall, you must complete both reading and writing to get an overall ELA scaled score. So that happens up until March 8th. If you take the assessment before March 8th, you have to take writing to get a score. If you participate in the spring summative window, starting on March 20th, so we have a 2-week gap where things are shut down. Starting on March 20th, the spring window opens. If your 9th and 10th graders participate in the spring window, writing will not be a part of that window. So they will only do the language arts portion of the ELA assessment, the literacy portion, and the listening and editing portions. That will be the only part that's available starting on March 20th. So if you want your 9th and 10th grade students to have a writing score, they have to take the assessment before March 8th. I don't want to say that I'm promoting that because I work for the Board of Education, and I don't want to promote something that they have distinctly said they do not want happening. So if you would like to have data for your students, if you want to have that trend data to look at that's common, writing will be available up until March 8th if you have students participate in that. Questions? Yes.
So if they take the writing test before March 8th, can they take the rest of the test after March 20th?
So that's a big part of the change. Thank you. That was a great segue. As of now, the answer is no. If they take the writing... Oh, thank you. So the people online can hear. The question was, if they take writing before March 8th, but do not finish the rest of the ELA assessment, then they cannot come to reading and do reading after March 20th and have the scores combine. That's what we're working on changing, so that if students do participate in writing before March 8th, those scores are still there. If they participate in the spring summative window, then they would be able to combine those scores. So that's kind of a preview. I don't know that that's happened yet. So as of now, if students participate in writing before March 8th, they have to complete all of language arts to get a scaled score. Yeah. So the question is, we're anticipating that they would be able to participate in writing before March 8th and then finish the rest of the language arts afterwards. It's contingent on some other contract issues that we have going on with AIR. So with a science contract that we're working on and with some amendment issues. So I'm hopeful that within the next couple of weeks we know. So probably by January, I'm hoping we know. But as of right now, so I don't want to get in trouble for oversharing, but just know that I know that's a question that people have had, and so we've taken that to AIR to see. It will probably depend on what AIR can do and approval of the board. Yeah.
I just want to clarify information that I've gotten in my new business. The 9 and 10 writing on stage in the spring is definitely off the table.
If you take thank you. So the question was, is 9 and 10 writing completely off the table for spring of 2018? We want writing if there's a grassroots effort to get writing back in. My understanding is that no, I don't think the board, even if they heard from everyone, my hope is that the board continually hears how we feel writing is important, and when it's assessed, then people are accountable for it, and it's taught well. Our concern is that starting next year, which is not a concern, this is valid, starting next year, writing will only be in 5th, 8th, and 11th. And so our concern is when we're only assessing writing in those grade levels, will we start to see back to the DWA days where we had heavy lift on teachers in 5th grade, or when I taught 6th grade, it was in 6th grade, of the DWA and writing not as strongly taught in the other grades. So I think it's always worth communicating with board members how we feel about writing, what positive improvements we've seen across the board. We've spoken with university people who have said we have fewer and fewer students in our remedial writing courses. They're coming to college more prepared for the type of writing that we do in college. So we've been excited, as I'm sure most of you. It's been a lot of hard work with writing and helping teachers teach students how to write. But we've seen a lot of great things come from that. And so I don't think it ever hurts to communicate that with board members about how important we think writing is. If I think that will change it for this spring, I don't think so. So the question of will we have writing in the spring summative assessment in 9th and 10th grade, the answer is no. So unless there's some great change in the board, which I doubt because they've already said they haven't liked the back and forth that we've done this year, and people, it's been upsetting for people in the field. I doubt that will change. As of right now, no writing starting March 20th. If participating in writing before then, they need to complete all of the language arts assessment for SAGE. Jason. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, percent proficient, role, and all those things that come with accountability, will that be solely based on that?
Yes. So the question was on accountability. If we choose to just participate in the spring summative window, so after March 20th, and there's only the language arts portion, not the writing portion of the ELA assessment, all of the accountability calculations are calculated based off of that spring summative window, so only the language arts portion. The writing portion will not be part of that accountability calculations.
When you're looking at growth, they'll only look at, so from last year, they'll only look at ELA.
So the question is, when we're looking at growth, last year we'll only look at ELA. No, so right now, the way that growth is measured, we're looking at the overall ELA score from the last year and how students performed there, and comparing that to how they performed on this exit assessment. We have a concern, and we've taken that to our technical advisory committee, where we said, okay, well, if we have this, writing is a big portion of the assessment, how is that going to correlate? They actually showed us some studies where the correlation between people who are good writers were good readers was at like 0.94%, the correlation between the assessments. And so the growth wouldn't be as off as you would think, as well as all students are coming from the same boat. So everybody got measured on ELA, and everybody's only getting measured on the language arts. And that's the question that we're looking at is, are we going to be looking at growth for everybody, or growth of you took the fall summative versus the spring summative? Those talks are still in place. Yeah, Mindy.
I want to go back to the RFP. Does this mean we're writing a new assessment for 9th and 10th grade?
So that's a great question. For the RFP, are we writing a new assessment for 9th and 10th grade? So even though there was a newspaper article that came out that said SAGE is dead, we've got a brand new assessment for 3 through 8, which ironically, we are still using our item bank for 3 through 8. It's pretty much the same assessment with a different platform, but the items are the same in 3rd through 8th grade. In 9th and 10th grade, the way that we are proposing, because we aren't sure what we're doing yet with 9th and 10th grade. So there's a couple of different routes that in the RFP vendors can apply for. They can apply for an off-the-shelf, or they can apply for a custom selection. If they use the custom selection, they would use our items for 9th and 10th grade that we have and incorporate those in with the assessment. If it's an off-the-shelf like ACT Aspire, then they would not use our items. And the follow-up question, I'm guessing, is what do we do with those items that we have 9th and 10th grade? Our hope is that if we end up with an off-the-shelf assessment, that we've talked with the assessment directors and now hopefully with you, the literacy directors, that if we don't use those items, that we somehow make them available for you in your systems if you have them available. Now, there are questions with that because especially with language arts, we pay for copyrights for all of the passages, the reading passages and writing passages that were not written specifically for Utah. So our vendor pays for those copyrights. The question is, if they use their own system, an off-the-shelf system, and we are allowing you to use the items, who's responsible for the copyrights for those passages? And so that will all be determined after we figure out which type of assessment we're going to go with. So hopefully we know that by March. We'll know one way or the other if it's an off-the-shelf or if it's customizable. And then if it's an off-the-shelf, then we'll put plans in place for how do we let you in the field utilize the items that we have so far with SAGE. Yeah, Mindy.
So, isn't there also a requirement that any state assessment that we use is aligned to our Utah Code standards?
Yes, and that's part of the RFP. The question is, isn't it part of the requirements that the assessment is aligned to our Utah standards? So part of the RFP, even though that's not mandated by the law, remember the law was only, does it show growth from 9th to 10th, not 8th to 9th, just 9th to 10? And is it predictive of college readiness? So those are the only two requirements in the law. But our state law requires that, or our board rule requires that we have assessments that are aligned to our standards. And so part of the RFP will be, do you align to the Utah standards? And many of them can just say, yes, we do. So another part of the RFP will be if they are awarded the contract, they have to go through an alignment study where they show the alignment to our standards. Yeah.
This is the last one, I promise. With the 9 and 10, will the teachers, people will be involved in reviewing data, any sort of refinement process will be put in place?
Right. So currently, the question is, will Utah teachers have input on the assessment in 9th and 10th grade? It depends on if we go with an off-the-shelf versus if we go with a customizable assessment. If we go with customizable, then Utah teachers will continue to be involved, like you have, Mindy, with item writing, with item review, with the data review. If we go with an off-the-shelf, like an ACT Aspire, we can request that we have some teachers involved in their item development, but it's not guaranteed. And we don't say like, and that's one of the differences with our state law, that in 3rd through 8th grade, it's required that we have parent review and we have Utah teachers reviewing every item before a student sees it. And that's not part of the 9th and 10th grade. So the 9th and 10th grade is very open and vague as far as what's required with state law. So it will be determined to be determined as we see which type of assessment we go with for 9th and 10th grade. Yeah, Jason. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the question on the RFP, will all the same rules apply for math and science as they do for language arts? And the answer is yes. With science, I know we're right in the middle of developing our 6th through 8th science assessment, and that will be piloted this year, and then that will be transferred over to our new vendor in 3 through 8, which is Questar. As far as 9th and 10th grade, I know they met last week, the science, it was approved by the board at the last board meeting that they could start looking at revising the science standards for both high school and elementary, and so they started that process last week. So part of our we have to do a process called peer review, where we show the federal government that our assessments are aligned to our standards and they are valid and reliable, and a lot of other things. And a big part of that is, does your assessment align to your standards? And so that will be a key piece for us to be able to meet peer review and to prove for our accountability purposes that our assessments meet the standards, they're valid and reliable, they have gone through the whole UDL process for special ed, and that they meet the needs of our EL students. All of that whole process has to be assured, and part of the scoring process for the RFP is, will you be able to meet our needs for peer review? So if we have a standards change, and that's part of the RFP, if standards change, then we go through a process of realigning to make sure that the assessment is still assessing the standards that we need it to. Any other questions? Lots of exciting things happening in the world of 9th and 10th grade. And I want to be clear, too, that our board members, our state school board members, really value hearing from you. I don't want to say much more than us, but if you're their constituents, Garrett says much more than us. If you're their constituent, they're always asking for input, and a lot of the people who are not involved in education or literacy or assessment are the ones with the loudest voices. And so hearing from you all or teachers in your district can be very beneficial for board members. They start to hear all sides of the story. So just another plug for that. And I think that's it, unless you have other questions. But my email is up on the first page. If you have questions about SAGE or are interested in being involved in any of the processes we have moving forward, then please let me know. Okay. Thanks, Garrett.
We will move on. Thank you so much. And thank you for those questions. That's really what I wanted to get to, because I knew you were going to get flooded with questions. So thank you so much for coming.
No, there's been lots of questions. And Rebecca gets to talk ACT.
Now we're going to be talking a little bit about ACT.
Now for the other fun topic. Just kidding.
Sorry. It's a segue because it goes between both of ours. One of the concerns from the assessment directors meeting 2 weeks ago was that the inconsistency with the board's decision to move forward with adding writing to 11th grade ACT and removing writing from 9th and 10th grade. We don't know. That's it. We don't know.
But I think if we say it out loud like that over and over, perhaps that will be something that's heard.
One thing that we've been messaging to teachers when they ask us is this, and that is there are some teachers who really hate writing assessment, okay, for whatever reason. They feel like it's an artificial process. We don't normally have kids just write and turn in a draft and all of that. So one of the things that we're trying to message to teachers, whether there's an assessment at the end of the year, writing is still a critical life skill. And so if you are one in the camp where you've hated the accountability and the assessment and you have to give this writing test that's really mean to my third graders or whatever it is, then now you have an opportunity to continue writing in a way that you believe is authentic and still show progress with your students. And so it's a chance to say, just because it's not tested doesn't mean it's not important. And I think we've worked so hard over the last 4 years. And when I say we, I'm talking about everybody in this room, to get teachers really working with writers, particularly third and fourth grade teachers. And, as they've moved up. And many teachers have told me that instruction is so much more interesting now, and it's a lot more fun. And once they figure out how to use Utah Compose, a lot of teachers have used that. And so those tools are still there. So teachers can still use that. And so maybe it's a way to kind of say, well, if this is how you feel, it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter just because it's not a test. And there's an opportunity for some professional learning in your districts and in your schools, just to say, hey, you know what? Now we're going to do authentic writing, and it takes it off as a hammer, and maybe that will make it better. I don't know.
Okay, thanks, Kim and Sid. So we're going to talk about ACT writing. So this got added this year. And as we go through, there's a couple of things that I want to talk about. Some of the research about what works. Some of the factors. So a lot of times when I start talking about ACT, if people don't have 11th grade students in whatever their charge is, they're like, I'm going to just kind of tune this out, go to email or something else. So we're going to talk a little bit about the continuity that's important in gaining those skills, starting in elementary school. And the structure of the test. What does the test actually look like? What is the question? How are students expected to respond? What does the scoring look like? And then some things that you can do and that you can have your teachers do across curricular areas that will really make a difference in being prepared for the ACT's writing component, as well as the rest of the test. So just to start with, we're going to do a little poll just for fun, because you guys have been sitting in a meeting and it's been riveting, as all meetings always are, right? So in this poll, there's a chance to answer A, B, or C. We're just going to do it that way. People online, you can do it in your office or wherever you are. But first question has to do with what kind of preparation makes the biggest difference in ACT scores, ACT outcomes. So here are your options. A, having students participate in an ACT prep program to be able to remediate any academic gaps or things that they've missed. B, using class time for ACT prep to make sure that kids who maybe wouldn't practice do that, they are guaranteed to have that time. Or C, having a challenging academic atmosphere, curriculum, and critical thinking skills. Okay, pick your answer. You've got A, B, or C. You guys are brilliant. The answer is C. So some of the common myths are that you can score really well on ACT if you just know a few tricks and you know how to eliminate incorrect answers. But that's actually not the case because it requires the knowledge, the skills that go behind answering those questions. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what the research shows on that as we go. Okay, so that leads us to what doesn't work. Spending class time, that's a key right there. Taking class time out and spending it on ACT prep does not change student achievement on the ACT. And actually, it can have a detrimental effect. So that leads to the question, well, if that doesn't work, all these ACT prep companies are really ready to sell us this stuff. So what does work? And what works are the elements of high quality instruction. So going through that critical, the demanding atmosphere, the high expectations, the chances for kids to be able to think at if we want to go with DOK levels, we're going for DOK 4, well, 3 and 4. So beyond recall of information. You notice down at the bottom, now we're also getting into positive behavior supports. So with the school climate, school atmosphere, and a high on-task rate. So there's a lot of research that shows on-task rates 94% and above in classrooms are kind of the sweet spot for where you want to be. If you dip below that, then student outcomes tend to suffer as well. So if you're picking out keywords, here are some of your keywords. So in one of the studies, they polled teachers and students to see what did they think made the biggest difference in student outcomes on the ACT. And lo and behold, those test marketing companies, test prep companies have done a really good job. It's kind of like people saying, hey, Fruit Loops are good for you. They have extra vitamin C, right? So it's the same thing. Here's your fluffish stuff over here, but it's not the real meat of what makes the difference. But that's not the case. So these are the things that the ACT actually measures. So long-term skills, we're going for analytical skills. We're looking at problem solving, complex reading. So this is more than reading the passage and finding the topic sentence or answering a question that you can go back and find information directly from the passage. This is drawing conclusions based on information in the passages. Data analysis. So I used to teach biology. That's my pitter-patter spot. I love biology. It's good stuff. And one of the things that was really interesting to me when I learned about the ACT and helping students to prepare for the ACT was that the science section is really a lot of reading and math, which is great because that's what scientists do. And it's about the nature of science, the actions involved in carrying out scientific investigations. It's not asking about what do mitochondria do or, how do DNA replicate. That's not on there. But there may be paragraphs and passages referring to those items that students need to be able to read and understand. Attention to details and the ability to write well. So this comes when you're looking at what do colleges and employers value. And when you're looking beyond, yeah, we have a test that can measure this, but if you're looking at college and career readiness, one of the skills or the items that colleges and employers want are people who can write well and who can communicate in an effective manner. So long-term is your key on here. Oops. So now this is going back to the idea of why does this matter if I don't have students that are juniors in the schools that I work with? So looking at here, and you guys know about this, but if you are looking at why does it matter to prepare for college outcomes early, it's highly predictive of what these student outcomes are going to be later on. So in this particular study, children who don't read proficiently by the end of third grade are 4 times more likely to leave school without a high school diploma. Typically, when students leave school without a high school diploma, not always, but typically, you'll find that if they take the ACT, they're going to struggle. Sometimes that's not the case because there are other reasons for leaving high school as well, but often you'll find that correlation there. Another one, this has to do with attendance. So one of the frustrations a lot of times as teachers is I can't teach them if they're not here. Yeah, that's exactly right. So when students miss large amounts of school, it has a detrimental effect on their outcomes. And that one applies K to 12. But the first study I thought was really interesting because it's focusing on kindergarten and first grade and the impact that that has on student learning outcomes. A lot of times we think about it in high school with truancy, but this is showing this actually goes clear back to elementary as well. And then this one, which has to do with math. So looking at early math skills can predict literacy skills as well as literacy skills can. So looking at the importance of all of these items together, this is a cross-departmental, school-wide effort that's going to require supports along all the different areas. So if you want to look at more information about these things, this particular report is a great report that summarizes from K to 12 what were things that were found to make a difference in post-secondary outcomes. It's not specific to the ACT. This is looking at college and career readiness. So what things make a difference? The things that make a difference with college and career readiness, though, correlate with the ACT. But this is a great study if you want to look it up. So let's talk about ACT with writing. Although first, any questions on the information we've covered so far? Garrett, will they get the PowerPoint?
Yes, I am. And I'm checking online real quick to see if you have any questions. And they want to copy this presentation as well. So, yes, you will, as soon as this meeting's over, I'm going to be sending all the handouts, PowerPoint.
So the question for online was, will you get a copy of the PowerPoint? The answer is yes, you will. Of course. That was Garrett's add-on. Okay, any questions besides that before we move on? Okay, let's talk about ACT with writing. I handed out a fact sheet. Looks like this. Garrett, do you know if this was emailed or posted for people online? It would have been earlier today. Okay, for those of you online, this will come. But this is a frequently asked questions page. So these are the questions that I get most often about the ACT with writing, so about the writing portion. And I just put them down on a paper so that all of the information is in one place. So those of you online, you'll get that information in the emailed attachments. Those of you who are here can refer to it as we go. looking at the ACT overall, you've got your 4 standard components. Those provide the composite scores. Plus, as of last year, they added a STEM score, which is looking at the science and math, and it's combined together. And so that's the basic stuff, and that's what we've done since 2012. So that's kind of what people are used to. And then as of this year, we get writing. So looking at the writing, before I jump into that, one question that has come up that I didn't put on the fact sheet because it's very difficult to answer on a fact sheet is, well, why do we have to do this if colleges in Utah don't use this for admissions? And the answer to that question is because it's not necessarily about giving this stuff to colleges in Utah. It's about getting data and information on how well students are writing, and also having that on a national standardized score so that we can look at the information. So, and then in addition, it provides an English language arts score, where without writing, you get the English composite, but you don't get an English language arts score. So, in a nutshell, that's some of the information about it. So let's go talk about the writing test. So it's 40 minutes long. There's one writing prompt. So students will take the 4 regular components of the test. Then each school or LEA can decide whether or not they want to have an extended break between the 4 regular parts and writing or not. There are some requirements for what that extended break needs to look like. And schools can decide if they want to, I'm not going to say deal with it, deal with the challenges of that extended break, if they want to figure out the logistics of that extended break, or if they would rather continue with the administration until it's done and then be done. And that's up to LEAs to decide what they want to do. But during that testing, you're looking at, if you're taking the paper ACT test, then you're going to be taking the paper writing test. That means that students will be handwriting it. The writing tests are scored by a person. They're not computer scored. Same with the online ones too, incidentally. If you're taking the online tests, then you're going to be typing the written portion. Another question that came up was, well, what about spelling? What about bad handwriting? They're not grading on spelling unless the spelling is to the point where they can't figure out what the student is writing. Same with handwriting. And this is pretty common among all college level tests. So if you look at AP testing, you look at IB testing that have large essay components, it's the same thing. If they can't read it, then they can't score it. So, yeah, question.
So if they're doing it on a computer, is it like a closed system, or is it more like their regular Word or Google Docs that makes corrections for them and some of those others?
So the question is, if they are doing the writing on the computer, is it a closed system, or is it more like Word docs where they would have, spell check or other tools? And the answer is it is a closed system that is done on a secure proctored site. There are no spell checks or no capitalization that shows up for you, no punctuation that may or may not be a helpful suggestion from Word. So none of those things. It just is you type, and whatever you put on the paper or the screen is what's there. Sure.
Does it take the same amount of time to get a score, regardless of whether you do the computer?
Question is, does it take the same amount of time to get a score whether you're doing the paper version or the computer version? And according to ACT, the answer is yes. So how that plays out, we'll see, but it is reported to be yes. Any online questions? Okay. So the other question that comes up is, can we mix and match? So could we have students doing paper testing for their 4 standard components and then do the online for the writing? And the answer is no. The administration is you're doing online or you're doing paper. So those are the options. So the writing assessment itself is a prompt that has one issue, and then it describes 3 different perspectives on that particular issue. This is an argumentative essay that they're looking at. They're looking at the student's ability to evaluate the 3 perspectives that are given, the ability for the student to state and add their own information into an argument, and then to build relationships between that information. So they're really looking at synthesizing information. They're looking at how clearly students can communicate their ideas. So this is beyond, write a paragraph about something. This is taking this information, synthesize it, create a coherent response that argues a position and support it. And so that's what college level writing is looking at. Any questions on this before? Right. Yeah. So the question is that it's not text-based, and so and that's correct. So they are given the prompt, and then I guess you could say it is text-based in that there's text provided in the prompt, but it's not based on like a text, like a book. Here are passages from a book, except maybe indirectly if they choose to cite somebody's opinion from something that they wrote. Okay. Any other questions on that before we move on? So the way it's scored, there's actually 5 scores that will come with writing. You have 4, 1 for each domain, and then an overall writing score. And that overall writing score contributes to the English language arts score, which goes along with the English composite and writing to make the English language arts. So the domains you've got our ideas and analysis, development and support, organization, language use, and conventions. So this is where no automatic periods, capitalization, if you're doing online, that's one of the areas that is assessed, is can students do that on their own? So, are we also dependent now on the red squiggly line that we get stuck? Yes. Yes. So the question is, are the 4 areas equal? Are they equally weighted? The answer is yes. And if you go to the website for ACT, you can actually look up the rubric. And I have a couple of these. Sorry, online people. Not that we don't love you, but we can send it to you if you want. But I brought some of the rubrics for different assessments. This has all of them on there, but the bottom one is the writing one, and it just goes over how is this scored. You can also find this online, and you can find a little bit more detailed information if you go to the supplemental technical manual. Do you want to pass that around? Here's some extra ones. So if you go to the supplemental technical manual, and I referenced that in the fact sheet, it'll actually break down the prompts and how it's scored. Let's see, any questions on this before we continue? The way it's scored? Anything online for questions? Okay. There are colleges outside of Utah that will use the ELA score as part of the admissions process. The colleges and universities in Utah prefer to use their admissions applications to evaluate student writing. So just keep that in mind. But there are other colleges and universities that do require the writing component. So that's available for students that apply to universities that do require that.
I've been told BYU does use the writing score.
Question is, I've been told BYU does use the writing score. I actually called all the colleges and universities in Utah to ask them, and they don't. They don't even look at it. They look at the essay that students turn in for their own information. They'll use the composite English score. Okay, any other questions on this? So if you would like to go look at the rubric for writing in particular, this is the link that you can get to. You can pull up the writing rubric and it shows you on scores of 1 to 6, which is the range that they'll score for each area, what they expect students to be able to do. And so it's a good guide, especially for your teachers. And incidentally, it aligns with Utah Compose. So when you're talking about how do we practice this, Utah Compose, use it. Yes, set the timer. It's a timed prompt. It'll give students data and or teachers data and students about that. So talking about, so how do we prepare students for this? These are general ideas. But if you're glancing through this list and you're going to pick out a couple of main ideas, what things would you pick out? What things stand out? A couple of ideas. What part of the first one? Improve a piece of writing. Have students work on improving things. Good. Any other things that stand out looking at this? If you're going to pick keywords or phrases, discuss, debate. Good. So looking at these higher level thinking skills is what we're going for. How to prepare for ACT writing. Again, looking at key phrases and ideas on here, we've got discussions, debates, write with different purposes for different audiences, analyze issues, and identify authors' perspectives. This in particular helps with looking at those 3 prompts, the information that students are going to have to synthesize in their own response. And then the purposes for writing. And then write with a time limit so that students can get used to, okay, I've got 40 minutes. I need to be able to identify what is my main argument and how am I going to support it in that time frame. So, I don't have 5 hours to do this. I can't take it home and edit it, but we've got to be able to do it.
One suggestion, because somebody goes, yeah, but if they're using Utah Compose, they're typing, and for most schools give the ACT so far on paper. Have the kids time it, handwrite it, and then type it into Utah Compose. So you get the feedback scores that you want, instant feedback, but they also are practicing writing by hand. Because when was the last time very many teachers required kids to solidly sit down and write for 40 solid minutes? You know how you're at about 5 minutes, most kids are doing this. So it's also a thing to think about that use the tools, the online tools, but also they really need to practice literally writing it by hand under timed conditions, and that's critical because they have to build up their hand stamina. I mean, most of us in the audience are going, duh, but it's something that we don't always think about.
And it will give kids also the chance to be able to practice in the way that they're going to be assessed, which is what we want them to be able to do. So 2 places where you can do writing practice, Utah Compose, and then all of the high schools in Utah have access to SHMOOP, which is an ACT review, test practice, topics, and there's a lot of tools on there, but one of the tools that they have is a writing lab, and so you can also access the information on there as well. Okay, questions on that? So here's some keywords. Time limit, clearly, they're going for clearly and analyzing. So looking at math. Math, it's math, we're literacy directors, but you guys also know that math skills require literacy skills. So helping math teachers to figure out how can we embed the things that you need students to be able to do in their instruction and vice versa. Having them explain, discuss solutions, things like that, looking for different ways to solve the same kinds of problems. Then science, my personal heartthrob pitter-patter, is, it's literacy and it's math with scientific information in there that students are responding to. So looking at this, we want students to use data to support their arguments. So they don't get to just state, well, I think it's this. Well, why? What's your evidence? Why do you think that's the case? What is it that supports that position? Which are great things to incorporate as you're working through writing skills and communication skills in other classes. Interpreting information, reading and discussing scientific reports. This particular site that I have linked on here summarizes all kinds of real research that comes out all the time, like almost every day. And but it's accessible. It's written in an accessible manner for students in high school because of the language that they use. It's at an upper high school, lower college level, which is great practice for students to read and to interpret, figure it out. And it has vocabulary that they may not see on a regular basis. But it's not too difficult that it would be like reading the actual journal articles, because some of those can be a little bit overwhelming. And then having students write lab reports, incomplete sentences with periods and capital letters, and in ways that are going to communicate information. So these are just basic skills. Metacognitive skills, we want kids to read questions carefully. But if you're going to do actual test practice things, for example, if you're going to do it for bell work or something in the beginning of a class, it's a great idea to have students practice an ACT style question that is related to whatever the content is for that particular class. And then do a think aloud about how did they decide to eliminate answers that were irrelevant and decide to select answers that support their reasoning for what the answer should be, and then have them talk about that. But that will get students used to thinking their way through the format of questions that are written a little bit differently than they may see otherwise. So you can find out more information if you want to about what the test actually looks like by going to the technical manual and the technical manual supplement, and then also the ACT writing website has a lot of good information on it as well. Okay, so this is a chance where you guys get to share with each other. So thinking about how can you increase preparation for students who are going to be taking both the English language arts component and the writing component on a K-12 basis. They're going to get there. How can you help your schools, your teachers, to be able to incorporate some of these practices into the things that they're doing? What are you doing already? What ideas could you share with each other? So just take 2 minutes. People online, if you want to do post things in the chat, you can do that. But if you guys want to just take a couple minutes, talk to each other about ideas that you have. And we'll reconvene in just a minute. Okay, we're going to reconvene in about 30 seconds. Okay, let's come back together. As we move forward, first of all, before we go we're almost to the end. You guys have survived the meeting. But before we get to the end, are there any ideas as you guys were talking that you're thinking, oh, that's a good idea? Other people might really be interested in hearing this, or maybe your neighbor thinks that about something you said. So if you guys can maybe share just 1 or 2 ideas of things that are being done within your school or LEA to help prepare students for what's coming up. And I'm one of those teachers that can wait. Thank you. Back corner. Wait, let me bring you the microphone, though.
So we don't dictate the common formative assessments for writing, but we do have a window at 3 times a year in which we ask the schools in their PLCs to determine a common writing prompt that they're going to use. We also pretty consistently use Utah Compose from elementary through junior through high school. So I would say those are 2 things that really help us.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else who has something that has worked well or something they'd like to share for the benefit of all of us? Thank you. Comment was about a haircut.
When our department chairs were looking at sample or ACT prompts, one of the things they were concerned about is students won't recognize it as the kind of writing they've been taught to do. So it's going to be a shift in how they think about dealing with multiple perspectives instead of just stating a claim and a counterclaim. So that's going to be where the work lies.
Yeah, and that's a really valid concern, especially when I look at things that my children, my students, my personal children, have worked on. I have a student who's a junior this year who'll be taking ACT with writing. I'm like, child, you need to be doing this thing. Is there a comment? Do they have cute hair? No, just kidding. Okay. Somebody, you are on camera. Somebody in a classroom. Hi. Okay. That's fun. Yes. So if you have people who would like to learn more about ACT, about preparing for the ACT, especially using core standards, we're going to be doing some trainings that have to do with that. This is ACT's sponsored trainings. They're doing one on accommodations that's on Friday. Is that tomorrow? Holy cow. That is tomorrow. Crazy. And then in January, they'll have a Q&A. The trainings that we're going to be providing, we're doing 2 sessions on how to use core standard instruction for preparation for the ACT. And this is open to teachers, to testing coordinators, testing administrators, director, anybody who would like to come. And the question is, are they here? And the answer is yes. However, you can also participate virtually because they'll be on WebEx. So if you would like to participate, you just need to go back to the link on there. There's a SurveyMonkey link. So the question for the ACT one, there isn't a register. There's one for accommodations that they sent out to testing coordinators in all the schools. That one you can just log in. So the one on the bottom, if you go back a slide, can you go back one slide, Garrett? So on this one, the 18th one, you can come. You don't need to register. We'll send out information that will come out through your testing administrators for your district. So, or you can just come. But they will be here, and they're going to be talking about test administration that day. So it'll be all the ins and outs of what you need to know to make sure that your test administration is ready to go. And then these 2 are ones that we're going to be doing. One is looking at core standards and instruction, preparing for the ACT, especially since that's what research shows works. So we're going to focus on that. And there'll be Megan Lopez, who was here earlier, will be talking about the writing and English language arts components. Our math specialist will be talking about the math components. I'll probably be doing the science because I think Scott has another meeting, Scott Ross Kelly, at the same time. But we'll be going over this information in a lot more depth than what we hit on today. And then there's if you need to know what will work on your testing day, what kinds of things do you need to make sure and plan, like extra pencils and, notifying teachers, staff. The smooth sailing one is one that we're going to talk about, all the helpful hints and things people wish they would have known when they started doing ACT test administration. And so that's an available training as well. Okay, I think that is oops. So if you have questions, or if you know other people who would have questions, please email me. You can call me as well, but a lot of times I'm out in meetings and I'm not at my desk. And so I'm not available to answer the phone as quickly, but usually by email. I'm able to do that more quickly. In addition, we're starting an ACT email listserv that has for anybody who's interested in getting emails about the ACT. So when we send out updates right now, they just go to the assessment directors, which is a great place for them to go. But we've also come to realize that there are a lot of other people who would like information about, items as we send them out and post them. So we're going to create an email listserv for that. If you would like to be on that, please put your name on here and your email address so that we can add you to that list. People online, if you will email me your email address and name and just say you want to be on the listserv, then we can add you to that as well. So this will just have updates. Some of it may or may not apply as directly to literacy, but it will all be about ACT. So.
Have one participant say where they found some successes with writing.
Oh, great.
I'll just add it to the PowerPoint. There's a couple of random ones throughout PowerPoint. I'll just say, hey, somebody from online said blah, blah, blah.
So thank you to the online participants and the response on here. Spreadsheets for peer review and writing. Linking the students to the sheet where they post their introductions, conclusions, specific responses to the prompt next to their name. And then, yeah. Yeah. So a way to be able to put feedback, it looks like, out. So any other questions having to do with ACT with writing? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I really appreciate having our assessment friends come down and talk to us about some important changes and how to prepare as best as we can for them. So that was huge, and I appreciate you guys asking those questions because I knew they were coming, and I knew they were much better at answering them than I would be. So I'm glad it worked out. So we're getting close to the end. Just want to talk about some upcoming events. Plain talk. Somebody from Canyon School District, Susan Henry, made the quote on the poster there that it's like it's the Woodstock of literacy. So I like that. It's a great conference. I've been twice. I'm probably going to go again this year. And I've just learned a ton. Things I wish I would have learned as a teacher, but at least things that I can forward on to not only to you but to teachers and different LEAs. But that's coming up. And they change it every year for some reason, because the first year I went, it was in like mid-February, and then it went to mid-March. Now it's late February. So February 26th, 28th, a great conference. So if it's your year to go, last year I was able to get the UNA High School ELA team to come to this, and it worked out really well for them because it was their year to go to an out-of-state conference, and they really enjoyed it as well. And that list of names will keep going. They'll add more and more people to be announced later. We have the legislative session, but there's nothing really going on with secondary language arts as far as any pieces of legislation. But there will be some early college issues that will kind of bleed over into not only literacy but assessment as well. And we'll keep you posted on anything that comes up. The next literacy director meeting is going to be January 16, 2018. I'm assuring you that it's going to be that date, and we won't change the date on you a couple times. I do apologize for that, moving this back to November 30th. So thank you for still coming, even though I changed the date on you a couple times. I know once you start marking your calendar, it's hard to change dates and times. And then in starting tomorrow, you can register. Nancy Fry is going to be coming back to Utah for talking about engagement by design. And it is a K-12 book. I haven't had a chance to sit down and really go through it, but they do talk about being a K-12 approach, not just an elementary approach. In my dissertation, I talk about engagement and the difference between engagement and motivation, and there are stark differences between those. And so I'm looking forward to attending this as well. But it is on March 1st, 2018. It's at the Radisson. It's going to be a packed room. If any of you were at the last one with Douglas Fisher, And Nancy Fry, it was pretty much standing room only, which is kind of weird. So there might have been people who were in there that, didn't pay, but all getting in there. And it was a great conference. So that'll be March 1st, 2018. Again, the Radisson in downtown, and registration opens tomorrow. And I'm not sure of the cost. It's a little bit pricey, but it's worth it. Is it 75? Okay, for some reason I thought it was higher, but 75 that's a bargain as far as I'm concerned. So this next semester we have the USB course offerings are the same as before. We have the methodology courses. When I first took over, there were like 10 classes offered, and it was told to me, you've got to shave it. We don't want to have this many. It's not cost effective at all. It's part of my budget. That I get a yearly budget, and a good portion of it goes to the classes. So what we agreed on was to keep the methodology courses in, how teachers would teach this, because those weren't as readily available as, say, taking an American literature class from, either Phoenix University or SLIC or USU. They were more readily available, those content area courses. So I couldn't keep those. But even with these 4 classes, I'm still getting a little bit of grief because we've had low marks. Adolescent literature is always full. There's always like 25, 30 people in there. But with the other 3, it's fluctuated. And if there's not 15, they don't want me putting the class forward. So this last semester, we had issues with teaching writing. So I pushed for that, and we went from having like 7 the previous semester, I think, to like 24 this last semester. So that was great. But we also did see a dip in content literacy instruction. So any teacher that's working on these endorsement courses, I would not recommend taking them anywhere else, except for the fact that it may be more convenient, or they need to get it done before their endorsement program is up. Several different types of endorsement programs, but it's $21 a unit, so it's $63 a class for tuition. The materials is minimal, and these are all taught by teachers that teach in Utah. All 4 of them are great, and they do a great job. And the feedback I get every semester is awesome. So for those of you that have teachers that are in the ARL, APT, SAEP, and you can keep going with the acronyms. But working on that endorsement, those are the classes that we have available. It starts January 11th and will be done by April 4th. Any questions on that? Yep, register through UEN. And it's a pretty straightforward process. And then on March 29th, and I'm going to try and get you out of here. Sorry, we're a couple minutes over, but that's okay. I'm going to be doing a workshop with Deborah Dean. Actually, she's going to be doing the workshop. I'm going to be probably taking notes and learning alongside you. On March 29th, we've got the day set, we've got the place set, we've got the time set, but we're still working on the logistics of what we're going to offer for this workshop. I know with the workshop, because I built this into one of my budgets, this book will be available for each participant. I know we'll be doing some kind of sub-reimbursement to get people out, but I still have to figure a lot of that stuff out. But that is coming on March 29th. So, and I want to keep this open to teachers, to literacy directors, to coaches. I want to fill the room. I put a big portion of my budget into this particular book, because there's a lot of, even though the book focuses on 4 to 10, there's stuff that I think goes K-12 wide, but we are going to be doing a secondary focus with this workshop. Any questions on that? I'll have more details at our next meeting. I'm going to be sitting down with Deborah Dean on December 13th, and we're going to kind of iron out what we want to do and the direction we want to go. Yes? Mm-hmm.
So that's our spring break. If we have teachers who attend, will they get paid to attend?
I will have to check, because I'll have to see what our board rule is on that. So, and that was the hardest thing, is I wanted to get this in, but everybody's spring break is so staggered. And we were looking at available dates that Deborah could do this. And by the time we started getting through them, this was like the date we could target. So, Let me see. I'll talk with Jennifer and Diana and see what we can do, because I do want to make this available to any and all teachers, regardless if they're on spring break or not. You know, I want to make this worth their while. But thank you. That's a good question. Any others? Okay. That's also my spring break because my kids are out in Tooele. So, man, I didn't think that one through. All right. And then a quick reminder for those of you that we're going to be participating in Jan Dole's research project that she talked about at the last meeting. Sorry, I didn't mean to put your private information on there. Well, it's your school one, so it's fine. But you're the coordinators these are the ones that were going to participate. She wants to make sure that you get that out to the teachers. It sounds like the IRB approval took 4 months, which to me is just ludicrous for what she wanted to do, especially how she was doing it. I thought USU's IRB was the worst thing on the planet, but apparently U of U has decided to one-up them. So the surveys are ready for you to pass out to those teachers if you decided to participate in this. And anything else? Questions, concerns, comments, derogatory remarks, horrible jokes? All right, thank you for coming, and we will see you on January 16th. Have a great day. Have a safe drive home.